you never want to be working with not the best product out there. So if you can use our property management system, but you're looking for X CRS or X functionality that meets your needs, we want to help you do that. Forcing people to use bad tech is an old way of thinking about it, and that's not going to be successful anymore.
No, not at all. All right, y'all. We are back for another episode of Hospitable. Hospitable is a podcast for the hospitality industry. And what we're trying to explore is how do we make hospitality more human in an age of digital innovation and technology. And that's why today is super excited. We're actually, you can't probably see through very well on these cameras, but we are on the 86th floor of One World Trade at the MCR offices with Jacob Messina, who is, you're kind of in a dual role, right? Senior VP of Technology for MCR, but also CEO of Stayntouch.
Yeah.
Jacob, thanks so much for letting us record the 86th floor overlooking the view.
Happy to chat.
So what I want to start with, I was thinking about doing this long drawn out intro, but you have a unique background. You've been in hospitality for a while, but I was stalking you a little bit. You were a culinary teacher for a few years before you got into the hotel business. Talk to me about that.
Sure.
Where'd your love for hospitality start?
Started at an early age, actually. Even before getting into restaurants, my hospitality interest came. I was an addict to RollerCoaster Tycoon and The Sims. And I thought, how could I apply this amazing ability that I had at playing Sims and SimCity and these games to a career? And I started dabbling in restaurants and then into hospitality. Things kind of went from there. So, yeah.
So I love that because that is so 90s kids, growing up in the 90s. I remember Sims and RollerCoaster Tycoon very well as well. So,
yeah. So I got into restaurants. I started working in restaurants in New York. I grew up in New York City. I started working in restaurants when I was 15. Restaurants, catering kitchens, all sorts of stuff, high end to low end. And I realized over time it was more of a passion than it was for a career for me. Mm-hmm. And then when I was in school, I was at the Cornell Hotel School, and I got to TA a bunch of classes and taught a couple on the culinary side, which was a lot of fun, and whole groups of people there, which was fun. So, and it's fun. Even some of my colleagues here are former students of mine that I was their TA, so I was responsible for them passing culinary theory.
I love that.
Yeah. So.
Why culinary theory? What about culinary theory kind of got you started? Obviously, we're in the hotel space now. We'll talk about that. But what was the culinary theory? Where did that come from? Was it just...
So it was a very interesting class. It was kind of a 2-part class. So you learned the chemistry behind cooking, and then you had to put it into practice. So it wasn't just a sit in a room and learn about how to do something. It was learn something, and then you have to go do something with it. And it was a really interesting class. I learned a lot from it, both as a student in it and teaching it in that culinary TA role. The first part of that was, when we started, when I was a student, we were in teams of 2. Mm-hmm. And then the next year when I was TA on it, teams of 4, but the same amount of work. And you actually found that the students did worse. And it really showed that cooking, and a very important part of cooking, is communication.
Yeah.
So, as a TA, I was thinking, this is going to be so much easier. They have twice as many resources. But it wasn't about resources. It was about being able to communicate, being able to plan ahead and to work with people and to understand what certain people are good at, what some people aren't at, and being able to work around that. So.
I mean, it sounds really interesting, especially if you love Sims and RollerCoaster Tycoon. And then also makes sense now on the technology side of the business when we get to Stayntouch here in a little bit. Makes a little bit more sense. I mean, because in a world of technology, we're overloaded with technology. We always think that technology is going to help us, another tool, another thing. And I'll go so far to say is that there hasn't been a lot of true innovation. In the last decade, it's a lot of iteration, right? When we think about big innovation, you can argue maybe iPhone, Tesla, depending on what you want to call innovation. I think there's flavors of innovation that have happened, especially in the digital world. But what we've seen a lot is just stacking on top of it. We're going to make this thing 1% better. And that doesn't always work.
Yeah. I actually, I think less technology is what's somewhat needed in many cases. And you wouldn't think of someone who's running a technology company to say that. But, like what we're doing with Stayntouch is not intending to be in people's faces with technology. It's to make things simpler so that people have more time to have a face-to-face conversation. It's not, oh, let me head down remembering short keys of what a Deluxe King 1 is, so that way I can do it. I was a 10-year Opera user back in the day, and I could still have all those short codes memorized but that's not helpful. That doesn't advance a conversation. It doesn't build a relationship or anything like that. So technology needs to support people, not get in the way of them.
Yeah, and I love how you said that, because I also know that prior to the technology side, you were marketing, and as a marketer myself, everyone thinks marketing is kind of sexy. I would actually say it's not. It's very boring, and it's test, iterate.
Yeah.
The sexy part of it is like the advertising in the front end, the content. But when you think about marketing theory and putting that in execution, it's a lot of testing one thing at a time with the idea that you're trying to limit as much friction.
Yep.
Right. And I feel like that kind of has set you up to be on the tech side. So how did that transition for you of working in hotels for all that time on the more marketing into online, how do you get into the technology? How did that career transition put you into a place where you're now running a technology company?
Yeah, it's a great question. Definitely took an interesting way of getting here when I was with Lowe's Hotels. So I got my start working with Lowe's Hotels, actually with their distribution team. So kind of a behind the scenes role, but really a great way of learning like how the sausage gets made in the hotel space. And also you learned at that point the disparity and the problems between a lot of our systems. I ended up running performance media, as you mentioned. And part of that I thought was around storytelling, and you have to do that, but have data behind it. So to know what's working, what's not. I was frustrated by, we were doing, when I started, we were 95% print with our ad spend. And, it was a $70,000, piece of media or one pager in travel and leisure. And they told you everyone in the United States saw it. With digital, you had the ability to track, you had the ability to do attribution, see what was working, and sometimes in real time. And that was exciting to me. It's to know what was working, how could I be doing better, how could we continue to evolve the story, and know that, nobody is seeing a banner ad and saying, oh, I'm going to go on a trip here because of that one view or something like that. It's you had to be able to tell the story of it, and also develop your value prop of like, why should someone purchase your product?
I really think that's a really cool insight, because I love telling stories. Like and I know we've sat and talked before, and we've already pre-show talking all kinds of stories and fun stuff. But I love this idea of telling stories with data, right? It's there's the art of storytelling, but then you need that data attribution in today's world to make things hit, right? And so tracking data is really important, but it's also can seemingly be overwhelming. Like, what do you got to track? What are you attributing to it? Where does it come from? When we look at, I'll say generally, but we're talking hospitality, where we look at all these technology stacks out there and things that you have access to, and you talk about you think less technology is needed. How do we attribute that? How do we look at or think about slimming down technology to be more effective so that we can have what we need without needing 1.5 million things?
Yeah. I think it's about enabling hoteliers. Not every hotel or every concept needs the same things. That's the approach we take at Stayntouch. We're very integrations focused and partner focused. Thank you for our partnership with OmniBoost.
Appreciate that.
But we want hoteliers to be able to select a tech stack that works for them. Way too long in our industry, there were just vertical players who you had to buy everything from them. And then you're getting maybe one good product and 10 bad products. And, that's not the way to be successful, in my opinion. And, having been in a lot of roles within hospitality, you never want to be working with not the best product out there. So if, you can use our property management system, but you're looking for X CRS or X functionality that meets your needs, we want to help you do that. Forcing people to use bad tech is an old way of thinking about it. And that's not going to be successful anymore.
No, not at all. And I love that you said that. I mean, that's part of like the OmniBoost magic, right? Is that we're source agnostic, and we like to think of ourselves as like a plug, and we can plug into anything and help make things easier. And that's, you've met Case a couple of times, and you know that's his passion. How do we simplify people's lives, right? And I think that's really cool, because when we think about hospitality and hotels in general, and we'll get into this kind of with your MCR side of things, but when you go to a hotel, when you're traveling, whether you're going for business or leisure or bleisure, you get off a 6-hour flight, a 7-hour flight, or a red-eye flight, and you get to the hotel. The last thing you want is to not have your reservation there, or there's a problem, or they're on the computer the whole time. You just want to get to your room and sleep. So talk to me a little bit about, you just mentioned Stayntouch and making things hotels easier. What are some of the things that like you're passionate about Stayntouch? Like, what is the mission that you're trying to build with Stayntouch as you've taken over as a CEO and really looking to scale? What are some of the things that you really want to make an impact on in this hotel space today?
Yeah. I'd say one of the first things, especially coming over from the customer side, and by that I don't mean, staying in hotels, which I do clearly enjoy doing, but I was a customer of Stayntouch first, implemented it at 11 properties, boutique hotels, everything from the TWA hotel at JFK to the Highline to hotels in Pasadena and others. And realizing that each hotel required a different set of features and they leaned on different features there. So that was important to know that not all hotels, it's not a cookie cutter approach. But what excites me about using technology in these hotels is that, I can bring the customer side of this to the team.
Yeah.
Knowing what a customer's expecting and knowing that it's very important for this technology to work at all times.
Yeah.
Especially with something as mission critical as a property management system, when it doesn't work, it has ramifications that, others aren't aware of. So understanding that, the customer has different needs than what a development team might need, or a product team who think that, our 3-year vision of a product roadmap means, it's got to do these 3 things. Like, we have to be more nimble than that. We need to understand that the hospitality tech industry 3 years ago looks nothing like it does today, and knowing that we need to be flexible enough to move and to innovate for the future there too.
Yeah. So I really like how you talk. I want to ask this question because there's 2 sides. I want to ask the question first. MCR has a huge portfolio, right? You mentioned being on the customer side and implementing Stayntouch is how you fell in love with the product, and now you're the CEO. When you look at MCR, you guys have over 180 plus properties now. It's close
151.
151. So 151 plus properties across the country here. So when you think about those different, because you guys have boutiques all the way through kind of big chains, how do you go about evaluating that? So when you think about the hotel, whether it's a chain, whether it's a boutique, and you think about their needs, how do you go about evaluating what an individual hotelier needs versus like a chain? And is there like a whole, can you give me some insights?
Yeah.
I'd love to learn about some of those insights there.
Sure. I mean, it was a very interesting experience for me, and I learned a ton from it, especially going into branded hotels as well as independents. There's areas that the needs are wildly different, but there are a lot of commonalities between what people are looking for and what will make them successful. At the end of the day, people are looking for simplicity. I would say simplicity is really important. Technology can't burden people. It can't go over the top. It can't make their lives harder.
Yeah.
If you use technology and it gets in the way of what you're trying to do, it's not going to be successful.
Yeah.
So it's got to be really simple.
Yeah.
And that's like what we do with Stayntouch. Like, the product is simple to use.
Yeah.
You don't have to have used a property management system before. One of the issues on the branded side that we see is your labor pools are really small. Because, if Marriott hotels, for example, they only hire from people that have worked at Marriott's before because they know the system, the technology. It's not agnostic between them.
Yeah.
And that's a limiting factor. It doesn't matter how you're doing it, but, you need to make things simple for people to learn so you can expand where you're hiring from, bring new people into the industry. It is very important. But also, I would say simplicity, consistency is important too. And that can be from a guest-facing side to make sure it's a similar experience, but even more so from systems and technology. If you're not building things with the idea of being simple or consistent, in 1 hotel, 2 hotels, 100 hotels, you can't scale. Otherwise it becomes a labor problem and you need to throw people at these problems. So consistency is a big piece of that. And that's something that technology can help enable very well.
Yeah, I love that because, the industry has changed, obviously, with not only technology changing, the world changed in the last 3 years with the pandemic, and travel has changed in the way we look at traveling. And it's no shortage of issues with airports, and more people are traveling than ever in the hotel experience. Talk to me a little bit about this, we have this idea that we can make hospitality more human through technology. What does that mean in your kind of words and the work that you do both at MCR and Stayntouch? Like, what does that mean to y'all? Like, what does that mean to Jacob?
Well, I'll share something before even just an earlier realization. I remember back when I was with Lowe's Hotels, I was at the corporate office and we'd hear about turnover that happened at a hotel. And it took a while before, I really made the connection. We'd see turnover that happened within a team. And then maybe like 2 to 3 months later, the performance of the hotel would start to suffer. And it wasn't easy to make the direct correlation. But part of the realization that I'd had over time was, we were so much information, both about guests, about the properties, about the destination, was being stored in our team members' heads.
Yeah.
And that's something that's very difficult to transfer to someone, and to me, that was a failure of technology. We didn't have systems in place to allow for that knowledge transfer. So, when I think about technology now and how you can be using it, whether it's Stayntouch or others, it's they need to facilitate those conversations and that knowledge transfer.
Yeah.
We can't rely on employees to be able to have all this in their head, because then it's a single point of failure. If, Rob decides to go from this hotel to that information walks out with them. But also, you want to make sure that the information is readily available, so you're not getting in the way. They have access to it, and if they need to know information about the guest, whether it's looking at profiles or preferences, it's there. Or maybe they want to have a genuine new conversation. So it allows for that flexibility.
I mean, that kind of geeks me out so much, because as a former recruiter and salesperson, like CRMs, right? And this is the kind of point of failure for a lot of sales organizations is everyone has their, Rolodex or whatever.
Yeah.
And CRMs are clunky and they're not easy to store. And I mean, if you think about a PMS, it's a CRM for the front of the hotel. And so I think that it's really interesting for me is, how do we create tech that is intuitive? So the other thing that you brought up, right, is tech has to be easy, cannot burden the experience. But we have a generational gap. Right. And we saw this coming out of COVID. If you go to a restaurant, especially in New York City, 9 times out of 10, it's a QR code and there's no more physical menus. But, my mom wants a physical menu because she can't see, that her iPhone is too small sometimes. She wants that physical menu to read through. So how have you seen maybe the generational gap of technology affect in a positive or negative way the hotel experience? From what you see every day, building technology for this space?
It's a good and complex question there. I would say one of the things, probably the biggest challenge that we have at Stayntouch, is often change management. Everyone wants newer technology and newer systems, but then it's a little bit scary when you finally get it. People are moving off of what they know, what they've used. And especially in our space, people have used some legacy products for years, which didn't change ever. So the buttons were always in the same place.
Yeah.
And now it's scary when the buttons are going to be in different places, and updates happen every couple weeks as opposed to every couple years. So there is definitely, the speed of change is happening very quickly here. So change management's a big piece of that, but you also have to be flexible enough that everyone's going to use your product differently, whether that's using it from mobile devices or things like that. The way that we try to do it is we speak in plain like English. We're not using complicated hospitality terms within it, and that's something we spend a lot of time on. We have people from outside the industry that review our products, so that way it makes sense to someone when they pick it up for the first time. It's not like you've had to be in the industry for 15 years.
Yeah.
If you're in Stayntouch, there are very few acronyms used. I mean, we love talking in acronyms in the hospitality industry. PMS for one.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm getting a crash course on the acronyms. Is Omnibus is a partner model. We work with many different partners and everyone has different acronyms, and it's a bit exhausting. And I think that's really cool I think more organizations need to think about, how do we simplify? Like, it used to be all this like business jargon and you wanted to have it. And I think we need to simplify it down, because I don't think there's any reason why somebody should be able to walk in from another industry off the street and be able to speak the same language and be able to kind of seamlessly integrate. And that's the beauty of technology today.
Yeah.
Right.
Sure.
Is that no matter your background, where you come from, what you've done in the past, you should be able to kind of step in and seamlessly integrate, because the system should be simplistic enough. Now, there's obviously the outliers and certain things and coding and whatnot that takes time. But I think on the base level, most things should be intuitive from a technology standpoint. I mean, my 5-year-old niece FaceTimes me all the time and she's flipping things up and it's like, what? She runs an iPhone better than I do. And I've been using an iPhone for 10 years.
Well, it's interesting. Like I think back my first front desk job, it probably took me honestly 2 months before I felt confident standing at the desk by myself and feeling comfortable there. The learning curve was so high. Not only are you trying to learn how to, build and manage a relationship with a guest, you have these systems that are complex and antiquated. One of the things we pride ourselves on with what we've built at Stayntouch is a front desk agent can learn how to use the system to do a full check-in and more in 45 minutes. That is a huge step just towards gaining that confidence and building that. And if they can feel confident in their systems, then it allows them the flexibility to have those conversations. They're not worried, oh, is this going to work? Am I going to be able to check this customer in? They know that already.
Yeah. And I think that too, right? When we look at time and attention, it's getting longer. It went really short with TikTok, and now it's kind of working its way back up and normalizing out. But if you make things so complicated that it takes 2 hours or a week to learn something, as humans, when we sit in an hour-long training, after about 30 minutes, we only retain 30%.
Yeah.
So, I did a lot of in my in my consulting life, a lot of corporate contract training, like corporate training, and I would go into these organizations and we do 2-hour trainings, and I would have to know that after about 30, 45 minutes, the second half of that training has to change in the way that you have impact, in the way that you break in breakout rooms and do different things, because their retention is going to lower. But if you can get them into thinking critically, doing real world examples or whatever, you can spin them back into
for sure
retention, right? And I think so many times you enter a new organization, there's just like long training videos and long demos, and like I want to be able to go online and like look on YouTube, find a 5-minute demo, understand the product, go swipe my credit card. I don't want to have to work with a salesperson anymore. Those are functionalities that we're working on at Omnibus as well. Because that's the world we live in today.
I think my biggest contribution in a meeting a couple of weeks ago, which has been repeated a lot, is, I was talking about something similar. People don't learn in long form anymore. They're learning, at their own speed, at their own, like on their own time. And we started doing a lot of our trainings in what I had referred to as snackable content. And that's been a big, term that we use internally. Like, it's like a TLDR, like too long didn't read. That's not getting the point across. Maybe it's good to have that much detail, but if you're just writing it for it to be in an email, that's not helpful. It needs to be snackable so that people can, understand what they're trying to do, learn from it, and then take it to the next step. I would say it also is important to be able to apply it, kind of calling back to that earlier comment around and story around culinary theory. It's one thing to learn in a classroom, but you're not going to retain that information if you don't start using it and if you don't start applying it. Like I remember that, for example, that, pasta, you need to get it to 180 degrees because that's when the gluten is able to change form. Otherwise, you don't use it. But if you just learn that, it's 180 degrees, but you're not applying it in a real life form, it's for naught.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I think that's, really interesting too. Going back to, I was recently traveling and we got in and it was after midnight, and we had used a third-party booking to book the hotel.
Sacrilegious.
I know. I know so bad. and I always joke, like, don't hate me when I say this out loud, because sometimes we just have to, whatever. And so we get in and one of the rooms wasn't ready or wasn't available. We couldn't find it. And what happened is they'd accidentally checked somebody else in.
Ooh, that's not good.
But no one actually had the room. They just like mishit a button. And so it wasn't showing because it was there, but it took the person about 10 minutes to figure it out. But what I thought was really cool at this particular hotel and this experience was the person was empowered to handle and you could tell that he had done this before. Because there's 3 of us and we had just gotten off a flight. I had actually been traveling. This was in Europe. I'd been traveling. I flew red eye over, landed in the morning, got a day room for a couple hours, took a nap, got up, got ready, flew up, then flew up to another part of Europe, to Northern Europe. And so it was just a long day of travel. And I was just like, guys, like let's figure this out. And but going back to this point of, the theory of they knew what they were doing, they knew where to look, they had the checks and balances in place, and he felt so empowered to handle the situation that there wasn't a need to like call a manager or get too upset. And that's where technology makes an impact, right? That's where technology can save the day. And it's also where technology can ruin the day, because if you don't know what's going on and you blame the system, I don't care. If it's 12:30 at night and I have to go get another hotel, are you kidding? I don't care if it's the system. I don't care what it is. Like, it's your fault. So I think that's a really cool point. And kind of coming back to that, you worked in this space for so long. Give me one of your best travel stories, whether best or worst travel stories. I know you've had a lot of them, and I'm putting you on the spot. But give me a travel story that sticks out in your mind.
Oof. Let's see. I'm actually going with a professional one first. It's probably not how you intended the question, but the worst thing I've ever had to do, the most painful thing, is walking guests. So a situation similar to yours, where you were flying in. I remember I was working at the Roger Williams Hotel here in New York City. I think it was like 17 or 18. Only person at the desk. You want to think you're empowered until you have no rooms left to sell. And it was the last person in late at night, probably 10:30 arrival. And, this guest came to check in. We were oversold. And there was also a convention in New York City. So I had to walk this guest out of state. The closest hotel room we could get this guest was in New Jersey. Oh. And that was probably one of the most difficult things I've done from a professional side in the hospitality piece. But
what's the key lesson for you? Like when you look back at that and the fact that, here we are talking about it today, that's vivid in your mind from 17 or 18-year-old. What was the lesson you took away from that?
One, was not thrilled with my revenue management team at the time for overselling the room. But, it's very easy to sit in an office and think, all right, we can oversell to a certain level, and there's no impact to that. But there's a real customer impact and there's a relationship impact. It's very unlikely that guest is going to stay at that hotel ever again. Yeah. So it's, there's both the human side as well as the technology side there. You asked about my favorite moments in travel. Probably it was one that involved almost no technology. I pre-COVID, my last trip before COVID, I got to go. I was hiking in Patagonia and down in Chile, and I had, thanks to the beauty of the internet, I had organized and booked a stay in an estancia on this lake farm, not realizing that they didn't speak English. So I found myself in Chile, unable to communicate with this family that I was with. And there was no internet, nothing. So very off the grid in that sense. So spent a week learning how to communicate non-verbally for the most part, mostly through photos on my phone, when I was hungry. But, we had a great time and I was able to learn from them. And, but I love just getting to be immersed in other cultures and other places. So.
I love that. I think that's such a cool experience. And it also tells you, and it shows you that this industry, while technology is super important, it's still about human connection. It's still about the relationship, and it's still about being human. And I think that's such a cool experience that you get to have, and super jealous. And it makes me think about, we hear on the news a lot about people getting bumped from flights because they're overselling, and we're seeing this happen more now than ever. Or maybe it's just more in the media about it, and it's causing more of a stir. So my last question as we kind of wrap up for you is, what do you think, it's going to be a 2-part question.
Okay.
What do you think is the biggest challenge still need to be solved in hospitality today? And what are you most excited for as it relates to hospitality as we look at the rest of this year, going into next year? And it could be some of the stuff you're working on at Stayntouch. It could just be what you're seeing as industry trends. So what do you think the biggest problem that we need to challenge is? And what are you most excited for?
Okay. So in the problem one, I'm going to answer this one a little bit of a different way. So, something that I try to coach the Stayntouch team, and even when we're in sales pitches or meetings, is there's nothing perfect about hospitality. There are problems galore. Anyone who tells you differently is lying to you, or they haven't spent a day in the industry. So, coming from the customer side, I can't tell you how many times I've been in a sales meeting or something like, oh, this is going to work on day one and it's going to be perfect. All your problems are going to be solved. And it's just false. So Literally, I meet with our sales team and with the other members of our team. Like, our job is not to be perfect. I don't expect that. I don't want that. If you spend all your time trying to be perfect, you're going to be unsuccessful, and it's going to take you a long time to be unsuccessful.
Yeah.
So it's better to spend your time knowing that nothing will go perfectly, because nothing in our industry does,
Yeah.
and be prepared for it, and have the teams ready and knowledgeable to know what happens when you get twists and things, when it doesn't go right.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's where companies in our space and hospitality, that's where you show your true color. Are you there when it goes wrong? That's important to us. So important to me.
I absolutely love that. And it makes me think about, I always used to joke, and I was a recruiter for 10 years, and I always joke that recruiting was one of the hardest things you ever have to do, for the sheer fact that in recruiting, it was with people on both. You weren't selling a product, you were selling people, right?
Yep.
Not selling people. You were helping people. Take the back.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You're selling the opportunity for people to
Correct.
connect,
Yeah.
right? And when you have people on both sides of an equation, people inherently are crazy. And so you get crazy. It's going to happen, and crazy can take many forms. So nothing's ever going to go as planned. And I think hospitality is a similar space, right? Whether it's a business traveler or a leisure traveler or a solo traveler or traveling with family and kids, things happen. And traveling it's amazing. The experience, you can't, I've been lucky to live in Europe for 2 years and travel a lot of places. And I know you've traveled a lot. We've shared some travel stories. Immersing in cultures, it's one of the most amazing experiences you'll ever have. That doesn't mean it's not fucking easy.
Yeah.
Right? It is hard, and there's always something that goes wrong. So I love that you share that. And I think that is just, it's something so unique, especially when you teach a team that's going to happen, because when a team is ready and willing and able to be of service.
Yeah.
And judging your team on, do we show up when things go wrong? That is such an amazing thing. And I love that you share that. So what are you most excited for? What is the most exciting thing as we look at the back half here of 2023 and going into 2024 that you're excited about?
Yeah. In terms of what I'm most excited about, I'm so happy for, the resurgence that we're seeing in travel, especially coming out of COVID, travel opening back up, and the opportunities it gives both within companies to grow again and flourish. What I see as exciting from a technology side is the facilitation of how we have these conversations. Whether it's using a piece of technology or not, but it's the ability for us to, hotels are finally investing in technology, which didn't happen for a really long time. I mean, anyone who's worked in the space has known that it was always the same 5 systems that hotels were using. I love having competition, whether it's Stayntouch or others. I'm sure you do on the Omnibus side. It makes us all better. That to me is exciting. I want us to have better players in the space that are pushing us to innovate and do more, because that didn't exist.
Yeah.
And it let people be lazy, and it let, we were in situations where products didn't change for 2 to 3 years at a time. But now that can't happen. You need to be constantly pushing for what's next, and how do you do better, and how do you make sure you're listening to your customers so that you know what they need. That's what's exciting to me, is more competition, honestly.
I love it. And I like to use the word, I wrote a book called The Social Soul, and in it I was talking about what I call competition. So it's cooperating with your competition. And it was termed by a friend of mine. And I just thought it was really cool, because I think there's something unique about working and solving problems as an industry, even though we're competing. But how do we solve this problem as an industry? How do we create this to be better?
Yeah.
Because when we talk about hospitality, it's to be hospitable, right? It's to be human. It's to welcome. And sometimes we need to have that competition to make the industry better, so that we can go back to what it means to be human.
Yeah.
And that's what's amazing.
I think that's a really great point. I mean, the nice part is the barriers to entry have come down. There's a lot more technology that's available. There's new companies that are, coming to market every day, and we all learn from one another. And sometimes someone is going to win one, deal because of something they've done, and you learn from that. You take it to the next one, but it makes us better.
Yeah.
I appreciate a lot of the things that my competitors are doing, and it's my job to make sure that we're innovating, at the same speed or faster than them, and making sure that we're listening at the same time.
I love that. I think the last thing there that you said is so important, is listen. I think it's really easy for for all of us to say we're listening, but we're such an echo chamber to really listen to the customer is such a unique thing. So that's really cool, and I'm really excited, to see what you continue to do, not only with Stay in Touch, but I know you've got the MCR stuff, and so it's really cool to see you grow. And I've just been it's been so much fun to get to know you and learn a little bit about how you get to play in both worlds and see things coming from the customer side, but also the technology side. So I'm excited to see your continued growth and the success of your teams, and obviously for the partnership with OmniBoost, and excited to see where that continues to take us as we continue to build out and do cool shit together. So
yeah, I'm excited about that too.
Yeah, I appreciate you. I appreciate you letting us, let me come to the World Trade Center here and see this amazing view and record. If anybody wants to learn more about what you're doing or stay in touch, how can they find you?
There's many ways. Just send me an email is the first one. I'm very accessible through all channels. So Jacob.Messina at stayntouch.com. Always open to talking hotel tech, whether it's related to our business or others. We love putting folks in touch with others that are innovating and doing really cool and interesting things, OmniBoost included. Please reach out. Happy to talk.
Awesome. And I'll make sure to link, if you want to learn more about Stay in Touch, I'll put the website. I'll also put your LinkedIn so people connect with you there. And I think it's really, and I know that you mean this when you say it, because we've talked about this and we've already made some different connections, but I think it's really easy for us to say, oh, I love talking about this. But when I tell y'all that he is one of the most successful people in the world, he is very, very genuine. So make sure you hit him up on that. If you're interested at all in what they're doing or just connecting with Jacob, I highly, highly recommend you reach out to him. Jacob, thank you again for the hospitality here today. I appreciate you and looking forward to quite a few more stories and grabbing a beer sometime. So appreciate you, my friend.
All right. Thanks, Rob.